Welcome back to Fassbinder Fridays. I decided to switch gears and cover a Fassbinder film that is, uh, along with Hair R Run Amok, which is the last one I covered, probably the only other true horror films that you could consider that Fassbinder was associated with that could be considered true horror. So this time we've got a film from 1973, and that is The Tenderness of the Wolves, or The Tender Wolves, depending on how you translate the German. Now, this film was directed by Uli Lommel, who is better known probably to most viewers as the director of Boogeyman. And of course, he's really kind of gone on a downhill slide in the 2000 and 2010s, doing a lot of direct-to-video schlock. He's done a lot of serial killer films actually, and this is a film about, or I guess it was, it's not about, well, it is about it's about Fritz Harman, the German child pedophile serial killer from the 1920s. And Fritz Harman was probably Fritz Harman to Germans is probably analogous to, say, Charles Manson or Ted Bundy to Americans in terms of the most prolific and uh, widely publicized serial killer. There's been stories and children's stories in Germany about Fritz Harman and how Fritz Harman will get you if you don't watch out, things like that. This film was an inspiration of Kurt Raub, the lead actor and star of this film, who was also the star of Why Does Hair R Run Amok? Kurt Raub shaved his head for this, apparently inspired by Peter Lorre from M. The film takes a lot of influence from M, which was obviously a classic film that covered that same topic, Fritz Harman, back in the 30s. Now, there's probably going to be a little bit of there's been some, I guess, some questionable things about who directed this film. We ought to cover that now. I believe Uli Lommel directed it. He got the credit. Everything that I've encountered regarding this film would indicate that Uli Lommel was the director. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about the fact that this film bears no real resemblance to the kind of movies that Uli Lommel would put out subsequently, which is true. But then again, think about Dario Argento, his 1970s output, and compare that to 2000 output. I think that the problem with this film, in terms of people that think that, well, Fassbinder directed it, is because it looks like a Fassbinder film. And it has all of the cast of characters that were closely centered around Fassbinder that he used in all his other movies. And so it really does look like a Fassbinder film, but according to all my sources, the story was Fassbinder didn't want to do this film. It was too much, believe it or not. He was much more into social commentary. He just thought this was a lot of nastiness. And I think he was directing some kind of stage or theater play, and he just didn't have time. He had money, sponsorship from the German film producing government. I guess he got sponsor dollars from the government he had to use. And he had Kurt Raub pressing him with this script about this serial killer Fritz Harman. And so I think he just passed it on to Uli Lommel because he didn't have time, honestly, to do it. Now, Fassbinder was in this film. He plays a pimp that is kind of friends with Fritz Harman in this film. Or I'm going to refer to Fritz Harman as Kurt Raub from here on out. Kurt Raub is a child killer. I mean, he likes young boys and he kills them. So the subject matter is rough material. And there's some scenes that are truly shocking in this. It's interesting to introspect about why this is so shocking for, particularly for, say, an American audience, as opposed to other super violent serial killer movies or toolbox murders or their standard fare where you've got a guy, don't answer the phone, guys that are serial killers brutalizing women. For some reason, that doesn't get the same level of reaction that uh, a homosexual child killer would get. And it's we as a public should think about why that's worse in our eyes than, say, and a woman that's being raped and terrorized. That's, it's, I guess, because it's adolescent boys that. I mean, for me, only thing I can tell you is my reaction to it was shocking. And I think it's just simply because he's going after adolescent boys. It's not so much that he's homosexual. It's just that he's cannibalizing and killing young boys. That's the story, and of course, it was based on true events. Unfortunately, hang on a second. Got to relight this. This is going to take me a while to get through this film because it's a complicated film, and it's one of the best, I think, in the filmography of Fassbinder. A lit cigar should stay lit for more than a few minutes, but some don't. Anyway, so getting past the Fassbinder Uli Lommel issue, Fassbinder got a production credit, and he's in the film. But even that, apparently, Fassbinder didn't want his name on this because of the subject matter. He thought it was too much. I think that's kind of ironic, knowing, well, after having watched as many Fassbinder films about homosexuality and some of the craziness that went on in his films and how he portrayed that subject matter, to say that this was too much for him, I find kind of interesting. But he, according to Uli Lommel, he put his name on this production as production supervisor, or however you want to call it, only after the film got a very intense reaction from critics in Berlin. Now, all the critical response to this wasn't all good. It was shocking as well to some folks, including a key critic in Berlin apparently jumped up and said, "Scandal, scandal," and ran out of the theater along with everybody else. And that's probably as a result of the first kill scene, which is gruesome and difficult to watch, but very effective. The film, I think, is a 10 out of 10. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. I'm in the same crowd, apparently, as Andy Warhol, who saw it in New York and thought it was a masterpiece as well, and asked Uli Lommel to direct the film and work with him later as a result of that. It's interesting to talk about the Uli Lommel's filmography post Tenderness of the Wolves, because he really did go off into the field. I mean, I like the Boogeyman, okay, but I think, Prosy was another one he did. I didn't think much of it. This film really does look like a Fassbinder film, and that's why I'm covering it today, because for all intents and purposes, it includes his funding, his people. Kurt Robb and Uli Lommel and all the people that are in this film were part of the the Fassbinder crew, so to speak, that permeate all his other films. So in terms of producing this film, Uli Lommel just kind of walked in as the director with all the resources that Fassbinder had already acquired in terms of people and dollars and those things. So I think it still needs to be considered a Fassbinder film, even though he didn't direct it. The thing that interests me about this film is not so much the homosexual nature of the film, the child killing, or adolescent, I guess more like adolescent killings, cannibalism. That's all gruesome stuff and horrific material to cover. I think what makes this film a masterpiece is a couple things. Number one, Kurt Robb was incredible. I think his performance in this film mirrors, in a lot of ways, Peter Lorre. This film was clearly his baby. He wrote the script. He threw himself. It's obvious when you watch this that Kurt Robb threw himself into this role. This is his defining role, I think, as an actor. And then the second thing I think that makes this film stand apart from other serial killer movies is the fact that this film is not so much talking about the horrific events that Fritz Harman, Kurt Robb portrayed. It's also, it is social commentary because everyone around Kurt Robb, Fritz Harman are a mixture of either indifference or tacit support of what's going on because they're benefiting from it. So what's happening is, Kurt Robb is killing off these kids these adolescents after he's utilized them, and then he's repackaging and selling off their flesh or giving it away. He's giving their clothes away, donating it to charity, or he's acting as if he's a charitable person out in public, supplying people with meat, stores of meat, clothes. All this is coming from all these murders they're occurring, and all the people around him know it's happening and don't do anything about it. They're basically tacitly condoning it because they're not stopping it. So everybody around everybody to a man in this film knows there's something strange going on, or simply has witnessed it firsthand. Like he's got a friend in this that's a guy that likes women essentially, but kind of hangs around Kurt Robb because he's supplying him with money. Walks in on Kurt Robb having killed an adolescent. So that's what makes this film so amazing, because it really is a commentary about the indifference of society to horrific events like this, and it says a lot about our indifference to totalitarian leadership with Hitler. I mean, it's a comment on German society that I don't think would be particularly pleasant, because it's revisiting the fact that level of indifference as a nation resulted in Hitler, Nazism. And it's only at the end when it becomes clear that things have gotten too risky, or the people around him are no longer really enjoying the benefit of what he's doing, that they basically plot with the police to stop it. So that's what really makes this a very fascinating watch. And it's a watch that you can relate to. Let's face it, I think everybody to certain varying degrees reacts with indifference to things if it doesn't directly affect them. I know I'm that way. I mean, not everybody's going to react the way they probably should react to events because it doesn't directly affect them. So yeah, it hits home in terms of that point. Now I've got two editions of this film. Let's see. The first was this old Anchor Bay DVD. And for a long time, this was all you had on this film. And then Arrow came out with really, I think, the definitive release. So first off, let's talk about this release. This is not a bad release. That came out, I want to say this came out in, let me see here. Wow, this DVD is 1999. It came out almost 20 years ago. This has the widescreen presentation, and it also has an audio commentary with the director Uli Lommel and a trailer and some talent bios. So, as well as a very small little booklet. This release is the definitive release. This is the Arrow. This is the Arrow release. It's got a new high definition digital transfer prepared by the Fassbinder Foundation. It's got the film in Blu-ray and standard DVD, so it's a combo pack. It also has a brand new audio commentary with Uli Lommel. And now, what's interesting, I've listened to both commentaries. It's funny, 20 years later, almost 20 years later, Uli basically kind of regurgitates what he said in the 1999 Anchor Bay, but I don't think he did it in a scripted way. It just was natural for him to talk about it. But even though it's two different audio commentaries, they sound, from an information standpoint, they're very, very similar. This film also has an introduction. This Blu-ray has an introduction about Uli Lommel, which is like 1 minute. It also has a 12-minute interview with Uli called The Tender Wolf. And then it has an interview with the director of photography, Jürgen Jürges. And this was his big break. Jürgen Jürges was not the cinematographer that Fassbinder preferred. And he gave Uli some shit about it too, because apparently Jürgen had a stuttering problem. But Uli defended him, and thankfully he did, because it's fantastically shot film. Even though they didn't have a lot of money for the film, I think they only had like 120,000 Deutschmarks, something like that, to do the film. This is back in '73. They had issues with lighting. The main scenario, the main events of the film take place in essentially what is a one-room attic apartment that's very, very dark. All the walls are this charcoal gray. And so you can imagine trying to move around and light a room like that. But it was fantastic. Apparently they used these little miniature light bulbs, beaks, I think they call them. The lighting was fantastic, and there's shadow effects that were fantastic that really go back to and harken back to early German Expressionism, the M film particularly. There's a gorgeous scene right out of the opening of Kurt Rob's shadow as he was just walking down the street. It's gorgeous, gorgeously done with little technical ability to light the film properly, as they would say in today's big budget films. Fantastically done. So I'm glad Uli stuck to his guns and kept Jürgen on as the cinematographer. There's also an interview with actor Rainer Will, who was one of the adolescent victims in the film. And then our buddy Stephen Thrower, who's a big fan of, as we know, of Jess Franco. He wrote The Delirious Cinema of Jess Franco. He spends about 40 minutes talking about this film. Then there's a stills gallery, theatrical trailer, and then a newly commissioned booklet. So this is a loaded release. This is the way to go if you haven't seen this film, or you don't, or you're unsure about it. I would strongly, and you like horror movies and serial killer movies, you need to check this baby out. This is awesome. This is the way to go. There's a booklet that covers, I don't know, it's 3 or 4 pages going into the details of the film. And then you've got the Blu-ray and the DVD. Here's the reversible artwork, which I like better. I think that minimalistic approach to the artwork, I think, is a lot better than that. So I'm going to switch it over. So yeah, this is a 10 out of 10, and I don't give out 10 out of 10s. I mean, you know, I can count on both hands the 10 out of 10 films This is a 10 out of 10. Excellent stuff. Very difficult subject matter. But I'll tell you, it'll make you think, and it's more than just your average serial killer film. So I highly recommend Tenderness of the Wolves, and I appreciate you watching. Thanks.